Resourceful Designer, episode 295. 2 things that helped me become a better designer.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. Growing up in the 80s, he wanted to own a muscle car, but never did. Mark DeCote.
Yeah, unless you think putting chrome rims on a Chevy Monza makes it a muscle car. No? Yeah, none of my friends did either. Oh well, it was a different time back then. Anyway, in this episode, I want to share 2 things with you that have helped me become a better designer. And by that, I don't mean my actual design skills or abilities. It's more that these 2 things have helped me to better understand how I do things and how I deal with clients. And by understanding these things, I've been able to improve what I do, and I believe you can too. But before I get to that, I want to share a resource with you. I recently ran into an issue with a web hosting company. Now, I won't share any names, but it's a company that I've been hosting websites with since 2005, since I first started my design business. And as you may or may not know, I switched to SiteGround a few years ago and have loved them ever since. But I still had 20 client websites hosted at this other company. These are all sites that dated from before I opened my SiteGround account. Now, as I said, I was having issues with this web host where the access to those 20 websites was spotty. If I want to get technical, I was getting some 500 errors where sometimes you'd load the page and they would load fine. Other times you'd load the page and you'd get an error. And it was getting very frustrating. Well, after several days back and forth with them trying to remedy this issue, I finally decided that my best option was simply to migrate all 20 websites to SiteGround, which I haven't had any problems with. Now, I knew that my SiteGround account that I currently had was pretty full, and there's no way that I can handle 20 more websites. So after looking at the various options, I decided to contact their customer support and inquire about what I can do. Now, I was thinking that I would need to purchase their dedicated cloud hosting, which in the long run would have cost me more money than what I had previously been paying between the 2 hosts. But after talking things over with them, they recommended that I simply purchase a second GoGeek plan. GoGeek is their highest shared hosting plan. This would give me enough space and bandwidth to migrate over the 20 sites. And it actually saves me money over what I was paying between my SiteGround account and I had 2 hosting accounts with this other web host. So that's what I did. It took me a few days to migrate everything over, and I'm so glad I did. In fact, one of my clients who runs an e-commerce store actually asked me the week after I moved the site over if I had done anything to their website, because for some reason, and they didn't understand why, adding new content to their store was suddenly so much faster than it was before. That alone told me that I made the right choice. Well, all of this to say that I am extremely happy with SiteGround as a web host, both for the product that they offer and the service that they offer. They could have easily taken my money and upgraded me to an expensive VPS because that's what I thought I needed. I contacted them thinking that I needed to upgrade to this cloud hosting platform. But instead, they steered me in a different direction that actually saved me money, even if it meant less money for them. And in doing so, they made me an even more loyal client than I was before. See, I'm even sharing the story with you about how great they are. So yes, the resource I want to share with you this week is SiteGround. And what's even better is they just this past week, they launched their own CDN, their content delivery network, and it's free for all their hosting plans. Yes, SiteGround still integrates with Cloudflare. If you knew anything about that or know anything about Cloudflare, they do integrate with them. But this new option is even easier to implement than their Cloudflare option. And since it's part of your hosting plan that comes with SiteGround, it can arguably speed up your website even more than if you're using Cloudflare CDN. So if you're looking for a fast and reliable web host and one who now offers its own CDN, why don't you check out SiteGround by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/SiteGround. I've been very happy with them for the past few years, and I know you will be too. Once again, resourcefuldesigner.com/SiteGround. And yes, that is an affiliate link. If you do use it, I do make a small commission if you decide to purchase and host with them. But I wouldn't be sharing this with you if I didn't believe in the service to begin with. So that's the resource this week. And now, 2 things that help me become a better designer. As I said at the beginning of the show, there are 2 things that I started doing that have helped me provide a better service to my clients, which in turn makes me a better designer as far as they're concerned. One of them I've been doing for quite a while, while the other I only just started doing a few years ago, and much more so since COVID-19 hit. So what are these 2 things, you ask? Contemplation and revision. Well, let me elaborate, and I'll start with contemplation. Now, contemplation is a very broad term, but in the context that I'm talking about, it's used after a design project is completed. When you have a busy schedule, it's very easy to finish one design project and immediately jump to the next one. After all, there are deadlines to meet and clients to satisfy, so, stop that diddle-daddling and get started on that next project already. If this is how you work, simply jumping from one project to the next, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. Some of the best insight that you can gain is by taking time to contemplate after a project is finished. Think about the ups and the downs. What went right with the project? What went wrong? Were there any parts of the project that slowed things down? Were you perhaps left waiting on a client for content? Did maybe a contractor that you hired to do part of the project, did they do everything right the first time? Or did you have to ask them for revisions, which slowed down everything else? Take the time to think about all aspects of the project and ask yourself, what could I have done to make things better? Is there anything that I can learn from this project that I could use to improve my SOP, my standard operating procedure? By doing so, making future projects go smoother. If you have a team that you work with, talk over the project with them. Ask them if there's anything that could have made their part of the project easier. If you do this after every project, you'll quickly learn ways to make your life easier. At one of my design businesses, Podcast Branding, I design podcast cover artwork for clients. Well, the way I do things now is different from the way I did things when I first started that business. Heck, the way I do things now is different than the way I was doing things just a few months ago. And that's all because I regularly take the time to contemplate how I've been doing things, and if there's anything I can do to improve upon the way I work. Now, I know that you may be thinking, well, I already do what you're suggesting automatically. If something works on a project, I'll implement it on a future project. And that's all well and good, and we should all do the same thing. But that's not the same thing as what I'm suggesting. Discovering something new and implementing it on a future project is great, and it should be automatic for you. Well, what I'm saying is that by dedicating 15, 30, 60 minutes, it all depends on the size of the project, but dedicating some time to contemplate the ups and the downs of how a project went, you can learn valuable insights that you may otherwise gloss over. Maybe the reason it feels like a client took so long getting to you with content is that you asked for it too late in the project. Maybe there was an earlier stage, or maybe you failed to follow up with the client to make sure they were on top of things. Is there anything you could do better? Just because you've always done things one way, maybe like asking for content at a certain stage, doesn't mean that you can't change things for the better. Maybe it always worked out in past projects, but this one project, it caused an issue. But that may be enough for you to change the way you do things to ensure that future projects don't have a similar issue. I'm sure you get the idea. And it's hard to remember, or even harder to try and fix problems if you don't think about them again once a project is over. If you have a mentality that it's done and behind you, you're not really going to learn anything. The same can be said of things that go well. If something goes really well with a project, you should figure out if there's any way to implement it in future projects. And if you just move on to the next project without taking the time to think about it, you may miss out on those benefits that you may not realize can be used in future projects. So contemplation, dedicating time after the completion of a design project to figure out what went well and what didn't, and how what you learned can improve your SOP on future projects. I've been doing this for years, taking the time after almost every project. I will admit, sometimes I don't, but on almost every project, I take a few minutes to whatever time is necessary to think over, what can I do? What did I learn? And I can honestly say, by doing this, it's made me a better designer. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk to you about that's helped me become a better designer is recording the conversations you have with your clients. I admit this one, I kind of started by accident. When I first started my side business, podcast branding, I started interviewing clients over Zoom. Call it a quick discovery meeting. These were only 10 to 15 minutes long. I needed to get some information in order to design their podcast artwork. And even though I took notes as we were talking, I would often need to maybe email the client or message them somehow for clarification on something or to ask them something else. And sometimes it can be embarrassing emailing a client and saying, I don't remember if you said this or that. And after doing this a couple of times, I decided that, hey, we're doing this over Zoom. Why don't I just record the meetings? Well, let me tell you, this became a game changer for me. Now, if there's something that I can't remember or if I'm not quite sure of, I can just rewatch the Zoom call, and most of the time I can find the answer. Sometimes it might be a few days between when I talk to a client and when I actually start on their project. And during those few days, I may forget some of the conversation we had. So now I make a point of rewatching the Zoom call before every project. And as I rewatch it, I follow along with the notes that I took during our meeting. Sometimes I'll pause the playback. Sometimes I'll rewind it. I'll re-listen to things again in order to add to or maybe clarify my notes. And oftentimes, I'll actually catch something that I missed during our live meeting, or maybe something I didn't fully comprehend, or I thought about it one way, but now that I'm listening back, I can think of it a different way. And it's helping me to understand things better. Yes, this does add more time to a project, but you would be amazed at just how much it makes working on the project easier. Not just that, but it allows me to create better artwork that meets the client's needs. And the clients appreciate how diligent I am, especially when I make reference back to our conversation. During the presentation, when I'm showing them the artwork, I'll say, you remember you said this in our conversation. And I was able to write that word for word by re-listening and copying it out. And the client will go, wow, Mark really remembers. He really cares. Now, the other huge benefit of recording your conversations is you'll be able to pick up on the little things, the things that you said, or maybe things you didn't say, or just generally how you communicate with your clients. Listening to yourself on a recording will help you improve your communication skills. Listen back. Did you sound confident? Were the questions you asked easy to understand? Did you answer the client's questions to your best of your abilities? The more you listen to yourself, the more you'll improve. Now, I've been doing this for years with the podcast. I hear every podcast episode 3 times. Once while I'm recording it, again while I'm editing it, and yes, I even listen to the show a 3rd time after it's been released. So I have a podcast player with all the shows that I subscribe to. I subscribe to Resourceful Designer, and when a new episode of Resourceful Designer comes out, I'll listen to it because I want to hear it with fresh ears to see what do I sound like to you, the same way you would be listening. And I think that I'm a better podcaster and communicator because of it. Now, recently, since now we can meet people face to face again, I've asked clients if I can actually record our conversation in person. I've used the voice recorder app on my iPhone. I just put my phone down on the table between us, I press record, and I record the conversation. It's not video, but you don't really need the video. I just need to hear what the people are saying. Now, I just explained to the client when I asked them this, I say, it's something that I would like to refer back to the recording. Should I need to clarify or anything, or maybe there's something that I missed or that? This way, I have something that I could look back on without having to bother you about it. The added benefit is we get a recording of everything that was said during the meeting, which eliminates the, oh, I thought you said this, or I thought you said that sort of scenario. So far, I've only done this a few times, but I haven't had a single client refuse or even question it. When I ask them if it's okay to record it, most of them just say, yeah, no problem. But that's the thing. In most places, it is illegal to record someone without their consent. Now, I know in some places, like some states in the US, only one party needs to know that they're being recorded. But for best practices, you should always ask your client, especially if you're dealing with somebody in a different state, because it doesn't necessarily mean that your state laws will apply. If they're in another state, you may have to abide to their state laws, and maybe their state says that both parties have to be notified. But just best practice, let your client know that you're recording. You're not doing it for nefarious reasons after all. Now, luckily, if you're doing it over something like Zoom, Zoom actually notifies participants that they are being recorded before they join the call. As they go to join, it says this call will be recorded and do you want to proceed? And by joining, they are actually consenting to being recorded. Now, in person, or if you're recording somebody on the phone, because you can record a phone call, especially if you're using a cell phone, it's really easy to record the phone call. Best practice is to ask for permission first before you record. Then once you press record, you ask again. That way you actually have their permission on record. For my meetings, I do just that. I ask them, is it okay to record them? If they say yes, then I press record, and then I ask them again if it's okay. I think my exact phrasing goes something like this. Today is, and I'll state the date, and I'll say I'm with, so that, and I'll name whoever the client is so that I know on the recording, or if anybody ever has to listen back, they know who was present. And then I'll say, do you consent to be recorded for the purpose of this meeting? And they'll say, yes, I do, and then we just move on. And believe me, since I started recording client meetings, I found it so much easier to work on their projects. I no longer have to ask them or say, I can't remember something. Did you say you wanted this or that? Did you say you wanted it to be green or you didn't want it to be green? All I have to do is listen back to the recording and I have my answer. And through listening, I'm becoming a better communicator, which will benefit me in my next client meeting. Now, I know these two things sound really simple, and maybe you're already doing them. If so, good for you. But I can tell you that these two things have helped me become a better designer, and I know they can do the same for you if you're not already doing them. So after your next design project, dedicate time, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, whatever. Dedicate some time to contemplate the ups and the downs of the project and take note of how you can do things better the next time. It'll make you a better designer. And during your next client meeting, ask if you can record the conversation. Your client will appreciate how diligent you are at understanding their needs. If you do these two things, you too can become a better designer. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Now, I want to remind you before I go that if you're looking for a really good web host, somebody that I highly recommend, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/siteground and check out what they offer. See if it's something that you can use. And with their new CDN service that they're offering now, free with all hosting plans, it makes for super fast websites that your clients will love. So one more time, that's resourcefuldesigner.com/siteground. So thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate you being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and that you try these two things. And let me know if you do. Send me a message. Feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. And let me know what you learned from your last design project, or let me know that you've recorded a conversation with a client and how it's helped you. I would love to hear from you. But that's it for me. Until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.